Welcome everyone to today's webinar and thank you for joining us. We know your time is precious and we appreciate you spending it with us. Today we are presenting EMU Enhanced Migrations and a version 4.2 update. This will be presented by Jason Thales and Michael Gliana. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your GoToMeeting control panel and I will raise them for discussion at the end of the presentation. Please also put yourself on mute during the presentation. Now, without further ado, we'll turn the time over to Jason Thales.
Thanks, Kari. Hopefully everybody can hear me clearly. I'm okay, Kari?
Perfect, Jason.
Okay, good. So, welcome everyone. For those of you who are new to EMU or missed last month's webinar, EMU is a BroadSource product and it stands for Extract, Manipulate and Update. And it's being used by many of our clients, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 service providers around the world to solve specific BroadWorks subscriber data management requirements. So our clients use EMU to assist in customer support, provisioning, service migrations, and we're going to speak a lot about that today, auditing, revenue leakage issues, backups and upgrades as well. Now, if you want access to last month's webinar that runs through a number of those features that I've listed, just send us a note, send us a request. We'll send you back a link to last month's webinar and happy to have a follow-up conversation with you about any of the topics, any of your specific needs as well. Just let us know. So for the past 3 months, we're in quarterly releases, of course, on EMU. The team has been delivering further enhancements to the EMU migration functionality, driving greater automation, accuracy and time savings in the management of your BroadWorks platforms. Now, today we are going to focus on subscriber migrations. And we're going to share with you a couple of demonstrations that step us through 5 use cases. Thanks, Michael, for progressing on that. So the sort of situations we've been focusing on with the migration enhancements relate to customer-initiated activities as well as regular actions, maybe major projects, load balancing, upgrade projects, version for service providers and for resellers, but also in the customer environment, the need for migrations relates to mergers, company acquisitions. We're going to show you a scenario where we split a part of a client out that's acquired by another client in today's demonstration, but also in migrations relating to just relocations, office relocations and move requests in the BroadWorks environment. So we're going to step you through some of those scenarios and we welcome questions. If you can reserve them to the end, that would be appreciated, but if there's anything that's particularly relevant to a point in time, then alert Kari to it and she'll pick an appropriate time to bring you in to raise that question. So the first scenario that we're going to run you through today to demonstrate the migration enhancements in this 4.2 release of EMU is we have a client, a customer, Acme International. They've got 3 offices local to us, Melbourne, Brisbane, another in Europe in London, and recently Acme International has decided to sell off its London office to Globex International. They're going to merge the Acme International office with the Globex International office, and we're going to step you through how EMU facilitates that in the BroadWorks environment. Michael's going to, in this particular case, I think, Michael, you're going to perform the merge across separate BroadWorks clusters.
That's correct.
Yep, and we'll as we go, we'll explain some of the rules, some of the different contexts that we can execute a migration in to give you a sense of what's possible. I mean, before EMU was able to perform these migrations, it wasn't a practical process. It often involved a rebuild, a definition and a new build in a BroadWorks environment. EMU is able to perform these migrations now in as simple as a scheduled function, or it could be a single click, or it could be a staged migration, and Michael will show you through that through the EMU interface and give you a sense of what's possible. So Michael, I'll hand over to you, and let's see the process of migrating the London office of Acme International through to Globex International.
Thanks, Jason. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. So in the last webinar, we've talked about the different EMU functions that you should be able to see on my screen now: the audit, compare, the update, provision, migrate, report, backup, and restore. And we also gave a quick demo of each function. Today, I'm going to talk more about the migrate function and the new enhancement that went into 4.2. So if you look at my screen and the migrate function, you'll see the three different flavors of migrate that we already had in version 4.1, which is to stage a migration, and that's doing a migration in a 10-step process. That normally fits a migration that's project managed. There's the single-click migration, which allows the administrator to move or migrate a user, a group, an enterprise, or a service provider from one container to another container, and that could be from one enterprise to another, or from one cluster to another, or even from one platform to another platform. And there's also the third flavor of migration, which is to schedule a migration to happen at a different time. With the single-click migration that's I'm showing now, in version 4.2 we added the type. So before, most of the migration was focused on migrating within the same platform. Now we support intra-platform within the same platform, or inter-platform, so to a different platform. And what we mean by a platform here is the AS cluster sharing the network server. And we do support a number of migration contexts. For example, there's the context of move, abandon, merge, clone, and morph. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the different contexts here. And then we have the usual scope of the migration. So we can migrate an individual user, we can migrate the whole group, including the users and virtual users, or the whole enterprise. So now I'm going to do a demo of the merge function for a group from my source service provider, which is Acme International. And there is an office in Acme International called London, to a destination which is on cluster 2 in this case. And you can see I can select different clusters here and automatically switch the enterprises to the cluster that I select. And let's move it to another service provider and into the London office. Before I click on the migrate, let me go to Copilot and show you the data sets for the two service providers. So this is cluster 1. If I log into that, go to the service provider, I've got the Acme International as a service provider, and the Acme International has 3 offices. It's got the Brisbane office, the London office, and the Melbourne office. And if I go to cluster 2 and log into that, I have the Globex International. And the Globex International has got 2 offices, a London office and a Paris office. So what we're trying to do here, so if I go to the London office of the destination service provider, it has 2 users. If I go to the resources profiles, it has 2 Astra devices. And if I go to the endpoints, it's got 2 endpoints with phone numbers and extensions. And if I go to the services, it's got an auto attendant and a hunt group. And if I go to the source enterprise, I go to the London office. The London office has 2 users again, Kevin and Matthew. And if I go to the services, it's got its own auto attendant, and to the hunt group, Let's go to hunt group. If I go to the resources, devices, it had 2 Polycom devices. So when I do the merger, I expect all these users and virtual users and devices and numbers and services and settings, everything to be merged and moved from the London office of Acme International into the London office of Globex International. So effectively, I'm merging the 2 London offices and then moving the users into one group. So let's go ahead and do that. That will take about a minute or so.
Just while you're going through that, Michael, do you want to just, you mentioned about some of the contexts there. I think that, moving from the London office in Acme to the London office in Globex, so we're doing that merge. Some of the context there relate to some of the group policies and those sorts of things as you're performing that shift from company to company. Can you explain some of the context differences when you're making that migration happen?
Sure. When we do a group merge, we either retain the group level settings of the source group, or we retain the group level settings of the destination group. And these settings we mean by things like policies and password rules and extension lengths and things like that. So the merge retains the group setting policies of the destination group, while abandon retains the group level settings of the source group, and that's the main difference between the two. So the migration finished. Now if I go to the other cluster, cluster 2, to the London office, and now refresh that with the users, now I have 4 users. So I've merged the 2 users from the London office of Acme International into the London office of Globex International. And if I go to resources, devices, then I have all the devices, the Asters and the Polycoms. And if I go to services or to attendant, I have both auto attendants, the one from the Acme London and the one from the Globex London. And if I go to services hunt group, and I have the hunter groups from both the Acme London and the Globex London. So effectively what we've done here is that we've merged the 2 London offices from one company and moved all the users and virtual users into another company. So if we go to the source cluster and our source service provider and refresh that, then we will no longer have the London office. So this concludes the first demo. Without something like a merge, only option to really merge the 2 groups in the past have been to manually copy the users and virtual users and all the settings between the 2. There was no easy way to combine entities, and that, whether it's a group or an enterprise, into one thing. And there's lots of reasons why you need to do that. I just had a discussion with a customer today who wanted to do exactly that for 600 users, because the users were moving all the time between groups, and they have the service provider construct, and really it was very hard for them to, when they moved the group, to share the resources. So they wanted to flatten the structure into like a number of groups, and they wanted a group merger. Back to you, Jace. Talk about the other use cases.
Thank you. So I think you've just turned our Acme International into an Acme National by removing our London office there. And I think that the next step that we wanted to show you guys in the demonstration is that now that we've got, say, 2 offices left in Acme, and they're in the same time zone, they're sitting in Melbourne and Brisbane, there's an opportunity potentially there for Melbourne and Brisbane to share some of the functions. So, telephony presence sort of functionality, or, putting users into the same hunt group, or sharing the same auto attendant or busy lamp field functions, retrieving parked calls, etc. So they move from, multiple groups sitting in a service provider model into groups within an enterprise architecture. And EMU supports the ability to migrate groups from a service provider construct into a enterprise construct so that the customer could then take advantage of some of the shared functions. So I think our next demonstration there, Michael, is just to show that now that we've removed London from that Acme company, that we can then migrate the Melbourne and Brisbane offices so that they're sitting in the same enterprise and can share some of those functions.
Okay, cool, no problem.
Go right ahead, my friend.
Thank you. So just before I go there, let me show you that what's left of the Acme International as a service provider. We've got the two offices left, the Brisbane office and the Melbourne office. And one problem with the service provider construct is that when you have different groups in the service provider, they can't really share any functions. They can't see, users in the groups can't see each other. So if I go to the Melbourne office and I go to services and hunt groups and select my hunt group and go to the agents of the hunt group, I've got the 3 users in that group as agents. Well, if I go search and look for more, I won't be able to add users from different groups within that service provider because that's the limitation of the service provider construct. And that limitation is also for other services, group services, that they can't span a group within the service provider construct, but they can span a group within the enterprise construct. So this service provider will benefit greatly from changing its model to an enterprise. And now the 2 offices are in the same time zone, then that makes a lot of sense for them. And before, there was no way of doing that, to change a service provider to an enterprise. EMU makes that happen really easily. So if I go to the migrate function again, to single click migration, I'm still doing intra-platform, and in this case I'm going to do a move, and then my scope is the whole enterprise, not just a group. And then my source enterprise, my source is the Acme International service provider, and I'm moving it again to the same cluster, so cluster 1, and my destination enterprise is Acme Enterprise. And the way I forced it to be an enterprise rather than a service provider is all I did was to go back to my Copilot or using EMU, and I created that enterprise, the Acme Enterprise. So I've created an empty Acme Enterprise without any groups or any users, anything like that. Sure, it's empty. And what I'm going to do is, using EMU, I'm going to convert that service provider to this enterprise and move all the groups and the users. So let's go ahead and do that. That will take about 2 to 3 minutes to do.
Okay, so while you're going through that, then I guess I think we had the next slide there about some of the other transformation scenarios. So just to cover off some of those, Michael. So we mentioned before that EMU facilitates migrations within the same platform, transforming from service provider to enterprise. It may be that that a startup system owner has deployed their initial BroadWorks construct as in an enterprise model, but then decides at some point they want to offer retailers an opportunity to sell their platform, and so they become a peer to other retailers and they convert the enterprise implementation into a service provider construct, and EMU supports that sort of transformation as well. But some of the other things that that are of interest to clients that clients have asked us about are things like moving a customer, for example, from they might be on release 19, for example, on one cluster on BroadWorks, but the system owner wants to give that customer the opportunity to experience features from R21, R22. They may have another cluster that's at the higher release level and move that customer to experience a new feature set on the higher revision cluster for a period of time, try before you buy on certain features, and then migrate that customer back if they don't choose to continue with those features, or leave them on the new cluster and migrate the rest of services across to that higher revision cluster. Those sorts of scenarios are now possible, very feasible, and easy to execute in an EMU-enabled environment. So I think that there's a range of scenarios that are possible. So once we've gone through the demo, if you've got specific scenarios that you want to test, or that we can test Michael on, raise those at the end of it. Other things that you wanted to mention there, Michael, or has your migration completed? Are you ready to show that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And also EMU 4.2 adds the user level migration into the mix as well. So we support 5 different contexts for each migration type and scope, group scope and the enterprise scope. So that's about 20 use cases there. And then if you add the user use cases, there's quite a lot of use cases out of the box to cover lots of migration aspects. But having said that, what we did in 4.2, we set the foundation to expand on that as well. So there's a slight different use case that the customers need, and then it's really easy for us to add other use cases into the mix. So we built a platform to do that, and we expanded greatly on what was really a very capable migration function of EMU to start with. So let's go back to our demo, and it's finished and took 150 seconds, so about 2.5 minutes. And if I go back to my Acme Enterprise, and used to be an empty enterprise, and I refresh that, I see that I have now the Brisbane and the Melbourne groups in the Acme Enterprise, and now they're part of the enterprise construct. So if I go to the Melbourne office like before, and I go to the Hunter group and click on it, and go to the agents of the Hunter group, like before I had the 3 agents. But now if I want to add users from the other group, from the Brisbane group to the Hunter group, I can, because it now lives in the enterprise construct. And I can easily do that like that. And then the groups of, the users in both groups now can share functions and can share busy line fields and all the other nice features of an enterprise, can do voice VPNs and the other features. So back to you, Jace, if you have anything else to add.
I think there was just one more thing that I just wanted to sort of touch on. I think that we mentioned that, you can take an entire enterprise, you can take groups, but you can also get into individual users, of course, and migrations are facilitated there. So I don't know whether there's anything that you want to talk to in terms of users as an option. I saw it on the drop down you showed before.
So what 4.2 does is it enhances the migration capability of migrating individual users, not within like a container, like a group or enterprise, but as an individual user. And also it's smart enough to figure out whether the user is using a device, and whether the device is a single user device or a multi-user device. And if it's a single user device, it migrates that device with the user. It knows that this is the only user that's using that device in that group. So when I'm migrating the user, I'll migrate those attributes that EMU determined they were even at the higher level, but only used by the user himself. So 4.2 does that too. So I think when it comes to migration, 4.2 expanded on that big time and built a platform to even expand on the use cases that we already have out of the box in EMU, and making it really, really easy to add more and more. Okay.
So, Kari, I don't know if you have received any questions from the participants, but now's a good time, I guess, to open up the lines and see if there's any additional questions that we can field. Now, we've got a couple of questions there from in the chat window there, Kari. Do you?
Yes. So we've received one from Bart. In an inter-platform migration scenario or an intra-platform migration with multiple AS clusters sharing the same NS, Can the system take care of the identity/device profile types, especially looking at Broadway's device management, that can exist on the ASA but do not exist on the ASB? Or do you need to make sure the profile types exist on System B before executing the migration?
So as a rule, that whenever we migrate an object or an entity like a group, then as a prerequisite, then the receiving enterprise for that group needs to be ready to receive that group. And that means that, you know, all your encores and device types and things like that needs to be already there for the group to be moved. EMU at the moment makes 2 exceptions to that rule. The first exception is phone numbers, because there is no way to make the receiving container have the phone numbers before the migration. Then EMU automatically migrate the phone numbers to the destination. And also the other one that we're looking at adding an exception for is domains, because, you know, managing domains might be, you know, a little bit hard to do, to add manually to the destination container. We had that capability. We're looking at enabling that capability for EMU to automatically migrate, create the domains before migration. So these are the 2 exceptions at the moment that we have to the rule, and the rest is that we expect the receiving entity to be ready with device types and encores and you know, the same password rules and PIN code rules and things like that, that would make that migration happen.
Thanks, Michael. The next question that's come through, is the system able to migrate the XMPP domain and the user's XMPP username/password associated with the Broadworks integrated IMNP service?
Good question. I'll have to get back to you about that. I believe yes. I believe we migrate the IMNP username and password. So EMU in general do migrate passwords and that includes user passwords, authentication passwords, and pretty sure the XMPP passwords as well. But it does require certain access to the platform to be able to do that. It requires SSH access to the database.
Are custom audio and video announcements like a personal voicemail greeting also taken into account in the different migration types?
Yes, so we do migrate announcements as well, and the announcement files get migrated between, you know, if they on a different cluster, they get migrated to the different cluster. If it's on the same cluster, they get relinked to the user, to the new user, or to the new group. And that goes also for backup and recovery, so not just migration. So the backup and recovery, though they don't copy the announcements files directly into the EMU backup, they have an ability to restore the announcements file if there was a file system backup for those announcements files. And that also includes custom devices.
Thanks, Michael. Lots of questions coming through. The next one, is everything done through the Broadworks ACIP interface, or is it direct database access required for certain actions?
Everything is done by the ACIP apart from things that we can get, like the passwords, which requires direct database access. Some of the passwords, not all the passwords.
Okay, another question. What about communication barrings?
You're pretty sure that we do support the communication barring service in every feature that we have. I can double check that, but I'm pretty sure that we do that. We do support it. Is there any specific thing about communication barring that will make it different? So user level communication barring, they get migrated. I'm pretty sure about that.
I just, hi, it's Ivan on phone. I just asked that because communication bearings are pretty complex, and I'm just interested in how you fight with this configuration.
User controlled or not? The fixed?
The fixed, because user controlled are, well, how can I say, they are defined in encos, but what about these operator determined communication bearings that are defined on enterprise level and assigned to user.
Yeah. So as a general, what we do that we do have APIs that deal with those the communication bonding, and what we do is that if you move if you're migrating a group, then we expect the destination enterprise to have that set up, and we migrate those settings with the group. But if we migrate the enterprise, then we set it up for that enterprise. But I agree that that was one of the difficult APIs that we had to deal with a couple of times.
Ivan, you had a few questions. Does that address all of them?
Can you migrate SIP passwords? Yes, we can, is the answer.
Okay, thanks, Michael. You can see a question there from Asif. Can you merge service functionalize such as AA rather than migrating it and having two AA in the group?
So that's like would be like a merger of a virtual user. So we add the merger cases to the group and the enterprises. We haven't had someone until now asking for a merger case for a virtual user, which is I think the question. So EMU doesn't support it out of the box, but I can't see why we can add that if it's required. If we go to the user level, then we remove those, the merge context from that. So when I have the merge context, and if I select my scope as a user for a virtual user, then that disappears because it's not relevant to the user migration and also the virtual user migration. But I can't see if that becomes really important for a customer. We can easily add that too.
Asif, does that answer your question?
Yes, that's quite clear. I was just asking the question because I wouldn't see why a customer would like to have two attendants are within the same group.
Okay, cool. Good point.
Okay.
That's Asif Sharma, yeah, from like I recognize the voice.
Yeah, it's me. That's Sharma, yes.
And you can do that with stage migration, by the way, but the automatic single-click migration, we haven't added a use case for that.
Okay, I'll open it up to anybody else who's got any questions. These have been fabulous.
I think there was just one more there about R22, Kari.
Yes, actually, if you go and check my screen, and if I go look at, I'm actually running on R22, and that tells me that it's EMU version 4.2 running Broadway version R22, so it's already there.
Fantastic. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'm happy to end the webinar here. Thank you, everyone. We really did appreciate you being here. If you do have any further questions that come to you maybe tomorrow or another day, please feel free to contact us via our website. We'd be happy to perhaps set up a time to go through it with you one-on-one or just to respond to you in email. We will also contact you in the coming weeks to invite you to our next webinar, and hope you can enjoy us. Thank you so much. Enjoy your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.